I steal my sister-in-law's bath water every day, because every time I drink her bath water, I would become incredibly strong the next day. My wife died early. Only me and my sister-in-law depend on each other, so the villagers always gossip behind my back. In the village, it's called gossiping about others. Everyone in the village, be quiet. Don't let her hear.
What are you afraid of?
What can he do? For these, I don't care. After all, there is a woman. It's like having a home. What's more, I found that my sister-in-law has an extraordinary physique. Once, I used her cut nails to soak in water. And that night, I killed a brown bear with my bare hands. In such cold weather, the village was already short of with this bear. This winter, I don't have to worry about lack of protein. And in the 80s, most women were very virtuous. And my sister-in-law was even more ingenious. She mixed the bear meat with Chinese cabbage into dumplings. It was minus 40 degrees. All these dumplings were put into a jar. Looking at the full jar of dumplings, my heart was also much more at ease. At night, I sat on the low kong, holding the bowl of dunks, still you'll heat. The steam hit my face, making me a little dazed. Outside the window is the deep forest. The biting white wind is like a wild ghost, beating against the old wooden wind. I turned my head, looked at her under the dim oil lamp. My sister-in-law mending cotton. Her name is Alan. Her profile looked particularly soft in the light. I don't know what secrets were hidden in her body. The sweet and fishy smell in the bath water is like an ancient curse, but more like a life-saving medicine. At this time, Alan returned to her room and started to take a bath, and I realized that my chance had come. Behind the leaky wooden barrel, the water was which was the only warmth in this icy world. I avoided Alan's sight like a thief, greedily guarding the drain. The water mixed with the scent of saponin and her body heat was not dirt to me, but liquid honey. When the warm liquid slid down my throat, I could clearly feel that. My shriveled blood vessels began to fill again. The atrophied muscles are like a wasteland waking up after rain, and tightened again. It's a pathological loop. In fact, it's not just bath water. Sometimes when he was tired, he would hand me a bowl of water he drank. As long as there is a little of his saliva on it, after I drank it, my vision would instantly become as sharp as an eagle. Even once, while he was napping, I collected the sweat stains on his pillow towel. That afternoon, I felt like I could punch through this forest with one punch, but soon, the village's gossip became increased, but I didn't care about it. But at this time, I was about to drink the bath water flowing from the pipe. Alan shouted, "Brother-in-law, someone is peeping." There seemed to be someone peeking. I hurriedly squatted down and escaped from here. Then I pretended to go around. I pushed open the door of the bathroom where Alan was. An awkward scene happened.
How did you get in?
Get out now. Alan at this time was not fully dressed yet. This is embarrassing. When Alan came out, her face was red and seemed to forget the incident of being peeped outside. In the following time, the jar of bear meat dumplings did allow us to live a peaceful life for a while. But I found that as time went by, the power in my body was constantly disappearing, and my body became weaker. I knew that only by constantly drinking I could regain my energy. On Dongzi's, the village organized to build a canal. This was a typical collective work in the 80s. If you didn't work hard, you would lose points. I carried a shovel and walked at the back of the line. I felt my legs were as heavy as lead. The weakness that came from the spine made my vision start to blur. My eyes that could see the sparrow's feathers 100 meters away. I couldn't even see the frozen soil under my feet clearly. Ellen followed behind the women's group, carrying a bamboo basket full of due to the freeze thaw. A section of the riverbed had a small-scale collapse. Hundreds of kilograms of granite rolled down the slope. We're facing several young men who were building the canal. In normal times, this weight was just a toy in my eyes. I just rushed over. I could easily push the stone out of the ditch. But at that moment, I was moved and rushed forward, my formerly full muscles, but suddenly deflated like a balloon. I caught the stone, but the feeling of shattering in my arms made me black out. The savage power that once allowed me to kill a bear with my bare hand disappeared like the ebbing tide at the critical moment. Disappeared without a trace. This is the closest I've ever been to death. At this time I was lying in the leaky side room. My body was hot. Alan pushed the door open. He didn't turn on the light. Only the snow light outside the window illuminated his thin figure. Alan brought a basin of warm and sat on my Kong head. He rolled up his sleeves and began to wipe my hot forehead with a towel. I was like a drowning man, greedily sniffing the unique and faint sweet and fishy smell. Slightly sweet and fishy. However, next, Alan did an unexpected I shouldn't expect. He put his frozen red hands into the basin of water, until the water in the basin was stained with the warmth of his skin and the fine sweat. Then he gently lifted my head and feed me the liquid. That can no longer be called water, and fed it into my mouth little by little. It turned out that Alan already knew everything, and he knew that I was the one outside the window that day. I don't know how Alan knew all of this, but at this moment to survive, I could only keep drinking the source of power. When the burning sensation exploded down my throat, the broken nerves and shriveled cells, like a long drought meets rain, my senses were recovering rapidly. I even heard from hundreds of meters away, the young men who were repairing the canal were talking about me, saying I might be cursed. Fortunately, with that, my body also recovered. With the heavy snow, the village's life slowed down, but the aura between me and Alan became more and more tense. Alan used to live in the west room, with an outer room in between, but since the day he saved my life on the Kong, he never went back to the leaky and cold room. He held his bedding and got into my bed with his head.
Brother-in-law, I'm so cold near me, okay? The coldness made me unable to sleep. Without your young force, I can't survive this night. So warm, so warm.
I lay stiff on the Kong. In the countryside of the 80s, if this thing got out, it would be a disgrace to my ancestors. But when Alan's cold, her icy body stuck to me. The yang energy in my body that was hot, was restless, was about to burn out my internal organs, seemed to find a floodgate to release. I felt like a red-hot soldering iron. And Alan was the cold ice that greedily absorbed heat. Her slender arms wrapped around my waist, with her cheek pressed against my chest. Late at night, I found that the so-called yin ki in my body began to be absorbed by Alan. She murmured in her half-sleep, with a redness in her voice that I had never heard before. "Don't leave me. This fire is so warm." As time went by, the villagers looked at us with more and more weak. Although my yang was absorbed. During the day, I always looked a little sickly pale, but my brute force didn't decrease at all. Even because I had a way to release it, I became more and more accurate. I never go hunting empty-handed. Alan is so beautiful. She looked like a fairy who came out of a snowdrift. In the 12th month, the old hunter who day and die in the village looked at me differently. He had spent his whole life in the old forest. He has seen fox and mountain demons. That day, he stopped me at the tobacco station. He tapped the bowl of his dry tobacco pipe on his shoe. He spurred a spurred.
Kui, there's something wrong with your house. The strength you have now is exchanged for life.
I ignored him. I just thought he was jealous that I could hunt boars every day. But that night, in the depths of the forest, there was a deafening, muffled sound. The earth dragon turning. The next day, the village chief and several militiamen broke in. Collective honor was so strong at that time. I heard the old gold mine behind the mountain, which was in a key mine for supporting national. Several technicians were buried in. The village chief pointed at me.
Don't hesitate. Let's go right now.
I subconsciously looked at Alan. He was standing behind the stove. In the steaming fog, in his eyes, there was a coldness that I had never seen before. He didn't speak. He just tapped his fingernails on the boiling water, gently tapped his nails. Then he lifted a bowl and handed it to me. Brother-in-law, drink this bowl to save people. I drank it in one go. The hot power instantly exploded like lava. Exploded in my spine. My eyes could even see through the texture of the door. At the mine, in the ice and snow, thousands of caddies of animals and granite were piled up. I was like crazy. I dug through those huge logs with my bare hands. Every punch could smash the frozen rocks. People around were dumbfounded. Their eyes on me were no longer in awe, but fear in their eyes because it was not human strength at all. Just as I moved the last boulder and rescued the 3 dying technicians, I suddenly felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. Catch it. This kid must have drunk some evil medicine, or was possessed by the dirty things in the mountain. This is Wu Dai's voice. He led a group of frightened villagers and surrounded me with hemp rope. In that era of but extremely conservative in the 80s. My abnormality became their outlet for fear. I was tied up tightly and locked in the commune's mill. But what they really wanted to deal with was Alan. She's a goblin. Such a scourge cannot stay in our village. Through the mill's window, I saw the light of torches towards my house in the distance. Go! I struggled wildly. The thick hemp rope was digging into me, leaving purple-black blood. But I had used up the medicine. I just drank to save her. I was so weak that I couldn't even stand. Just then, the door of the mill was quietly pushed open. Alan walked in. He put on the red cotton pad jacket only worn against the firelight. Fascinating. He held a bowl of light yellow liquid in his hand and walked towards me. His cold hand stroked my face, and tears flowed from his eyes. My brother-in-law wants to burn me, saying I was a white bone spirit that sucked people's... But I'm not. When you drank the first mouthful of bath water, we couldn't be apart. Drink it, and my brother-in-law will take me away. This forest can't hold us anymore. I smelled the bowl of light yellow liquid. I instantly knew what it was. Perhaps time was limited. Alan actually brought it. The lung fluid. She excused because I could clearly smell an indescribable smell. I didn't hesitate, still drank it down. My pupils shrank to the size of a needle in an instant. The worm-eaten beam in the mill. In my eyes, I could even see the beating of the wooden fibers. I was shocked. The thick hemp rope broke like a rotten straw rope. The broken fibers even made a popping sound in the air. I picked up Alan up before the villagers with torches rushed in. I jumped up and directly smashed the mill's earthen wall. I took Alan and sneaked home. I used sack. I packed the only dried bear meat at home and mink fur in the flying dust and screams. I stepped through the deep snow up to my knees. The snowland of Greater Kingdom disappeared behind us little by little. In its place was replaced by the increasingly humid air to avoid the villagers in the village. Alan and I hid at the freight station by the forest. In the dark, we got into a coal truck heading south. The carriage was pitch black, and the smell of coal dust was strong. Alan curled up in my big fur coat. His body still had that abnormal warmth since drinking Alan, that yellow liquid that I can't mention. My senses were incredibly sensitive through the thick wooden carriage. I could even hear the cracking sound of ice in the rail gap. After 5 days and nights, the train stopped at the old North Station in Heishi. In Shenzhen in 1988, the air was filled with the aroma of fried buns and the moisture of Huangpu River. There were 28 bikes everywhere, and the jingle of bicycle bells. Men wore polyester shirts, and women started to cut their hair. I carried a huge sack, stood at the exit with Alan, which looked out of place. Alan was bowing his head. Those hands that were frozen red in the Greater Kingdom Mountains were tightly clutching the hem. The most important thing is to find a place to stay. My aided vision scanned the crowd. I scanned the crowd, and it felt amazing. Everyone's movements seemed to be in slow motion in my eyes. We stopped in a shanty town by the river. It's called Gundala. It was full of low shingles, and the smell of the gutter and the smell of human life mixed together. Although it's shabby, no one checks the papers. It's suitable for us outlaws. The landlord was a one-eyed man. He saw I was strong, and I was with a beautiful and outrageous sister-in-law. A strange look flashed in his eyes.
15 yuan a month. Separate bills. Young man, looking at your body, are you here to work with your strength? I nodded. I took out a few crumpled banknotes from my pocket. In the first week after settling down, I deeply experienced what it means to sit and eat. In the big city, even drinking water cost money, and Alan's body
Seemed to be extremely repelled by the city's tap water.
he started to have a fever,
There were faint, dark, golden lines under his skin.
like some kind of withered vine. I knew he needed something other than tap water. I could only hold him tightly, let Alan absorb the yonki I exuded. But at this time, and who hadn't drunk water for a long time didn't get better. I suddenly thought of a way. That is to, I imitated Alan's behavior in the grate, to soak my hands full of strange power, immerse them in the cold well water. In an instant, I felt the heat in my body flow through my pores, continuously poured into the water. The originally clear water actually turned a faint fishy and sweet taste. Alan's fever subsided after drinking and her skin became rosy again. But I felt an unprecedented hunger. This hunger is not the emptiness in my but every cell was screaming frantically to eat and to vent. At this time, Alan actually spit out the water she just drank into an empty bowl. I understood what he meant, so I drank the water without hesitation. Instantly, my physical strength was restored. Then, to make money, I went to the Shiliapu wharf,
Which was the busiest freight distribution center in Shanghai. Numerous goods from south to north were carried off the ship.
Recruit coolies. 2 cents for a bag of cement. Recruiting laborers. 2 cents for a bag of cement. Recruiting laborers, 2 cents for a bag of cement.
The foreman is a fat man, sitting in a shaky bamboo chair. I walked over and said I wanted to carry bags. The other coolies all laughed. Although I looked strong, but not very tall, I was just a blind migrant in their eyes. I didn't say a word. I walked directly into the shadow. There was a stack of newly unloaded steel ingots. Each one weighed 200 catties. I bent down and grabbed one with each hand, as if I was carrying to foam boards, and easily threw them on my shoulders. At that moment, the sound on the dock disappeared. Only the sound of the river hitting the shore. The contractor's cigarette butt fell on his thigh and burned a hole. He didn't even know it. I said nothing. I took steps towards the warehouse. Every step, the cement floor underfoot, made a dull sound with every step, as if it couldn't bear the extreme density. In just 1 month, I earned a year's salary in just 1 month. When I got home, I brought Alan a shiny grass to eat.
Brother-in-law, what's wrong?
Alan was tearing the chicken leg and looked worriedly at my tiger's mouth. There was a small crack there. It wasn't caused by heavy weight, but because my body's strength is too strong, my muscles cracked the skin when they burst out.
It's okay. It's inevitable to be strong.
I just finished. My sharp ears suddenly caught a trace of a very faint breathing sound. It was a trained breathing, short and powerful. It was definitely not an ordinary rogue. I suddenly stood up and blew out the oil lamp in the dark. My eyes glowed with a faint green light in the dark, like a wolf in the forest. I told Alan to hide under the bed. I walked to the door silently. I felt 3 people sticking to the wall, holding the kind of unique in the 80s, electric shock batons, and they were the workers during the day. They saw me doing the work of more than 10 people, and took their livelihood, and planned to beat me up at night, so I couldn't go to work. But obviously, they miscalculated. I just slightly fought back. The 3 of them limped away. It seems that in this city, you can't make a fortune by relying on your strength. So I made a decision. I took my savings, and Alan, and took the express train to Guangzhou. It was the first time I took a soft seat train. Although it was a black ticket bought through connections, but seeing Alan leaning on the back of the chair, and drinking orange soda from a glass bottle, my strength in my heart dissipated a lot. In Guangzhou in 1980, were carrying black leather bags and wearing padded shoulder suits. There was no smell of blood in the air, but a desire that made my blood boil. We rented a small shop with a loft. It was not far from the famous clothing wholesale market. The streets were full of sweating coolies carrying big bags. In the early days, I resumed doing manual labor, but this time I didn't work for others. I became a contractor. The freight efficiency in the wholesale market, because of narrow roads, big trucks can't enter. It all depends on human power. I used my superhuman endurance and strength. I pulled a flatbed truck 3 times heavier than others. I could zip through the narrow alleys. Wholesalers like to find me most because I deliver this and never complain. Others make 10 trips a day. I can make 30 trips. My East Hush Seek allows me to sleep almost none, as long as I drink a sip of Alanjan every morning. Water with a faint, sweet and fishy smell. I can run like a perpetual motion machine. In half a year, my pocket started to bulge. I was no longer the mountain man in a worn-out car. I bought myself a Shanghai brand all-steel watch. I bought her several sets of the most popular fabrics. Alan has changed. She was no longer as timid as she was in the village. She learned Cantonese and even started to keep accounts for me. Her complexion, which was unusually rosy due to her physique, in the prosperous Guangzhou area, was praised by the neighbors as a lucky wife. It was the spring of 1990. The rainy season in Guangzhou was very humid. There was a big boss in the market who made electronics, named Chun Jinfang, known as Fashu. He had a batch of tape recorders imported from Hong Kong. The core parts, due to the warehouse collapse caused by the rain, were buried in an abandoned house in the suburb, the renovated warehouse. Who can dig out those dozens of boxes of precision? I'll pay 50 yuan for each box you dig out, but it may collapse at any time. Those who dare. I pushed through the crowd and walked out. Uncle Fei, I'll take this job, but I don't want change. I want 10 imported radios picked out of it. I've thought it through. I can't make a fortune by just working hard. I want to be a prophet. I want to get the first batch. I walked into the dark and damp air raid shelter. The brackets here have begun to break. The vision of ordinary people is almost blind here, but a dark golden light flashed in my eyes. The darkness became as clear as day. I saw hundreds of caddies of stone beams pressing on the box. I took a deep breath, and the blood in my body began to flow. The long-lost brute force, like a brown bear, possessed me, roaring in my veins. I held up the collapsing stone beam with one hand, and the other hand quickly moved the box. Those boxes need people to carry in ordinary hands, but I moved it as easily as I moved the dumpling jar. Just as I moved out the last box, the whole roof suddenly collapsed. Alan screamed at the hole with despair in her voice. Deku. The smoke cleared. I carried the last box of goods, covered in dust, but unscathed. I walked out. That night, I brought 10 of the most rare, extremely rare imported full-band receivers. I went home to live a better life with Alan. I bought the best house by the Pearl River. I want you to be picked up and dropped off by cars. With these 10 radios as startup capital, I officially started my dream of a business empire. I didn't carry bags at the dock. I used my keen senses to start. I started buying low and selling high in the market. In this ambitious era, when a person's wealth grows faster than exceeds his background, it will always attract malicious eyes. Uncle Fei is grateful to me, but his business partners behind him, they are interested in my strong body that can't be moved. They think that there must be something hidden in me. Secret recipe that can make ordinary people.
Tomorrow, there'll be an upscale wine party at the White Swan Hotel. The big boss wants to see.
Uncle Fei patted me on the shoulder, with a complex light in his eyes. I know, this wine party is likely a trap for me. In Guangzhou White Swan Hotel in 1990. Which was the first 5-star hotel in the country. The entrance was full of crowns and Mercedes. The crystal chandelier in the lobby was dazzling. I put on the black leather jacket that Alan picked. A black leather jacket, with a white shirt inside. Although the collar was still tight, my thick neck was a bit uncomfortable. But in the mirror, I looked like a successful Taoist priest. The wine party was in a private room on the second floor. I pushed the door open and saw smoke. Except Xu, there were 3 middle-aged men, all looking rosy, with well-dressed secretaries by their sides. The man in the main seat is surnamed, known as Long. He is engaged in hardware his eyes are like those of a venomous snake. I didn't speak. I just nodded my head. I sat down. Brother Long pushed a cup of Willianji and looked at me with a smile. Brother Darkoe, Uncle Fa said you can hold a stone beam with one hand in a bomb shelter. This skill makes you a good hunter in Greater Kingdom. And in Guangzhou, it's a stepping stone to wealth. But I, Long, have a rule in business. To enter my circle, show your real skills. He clapped his hands and the bodyguard behind him, from his bag, took out a special pure steel grips, which is used to test mechanical strength. After breaking it, you'll own 20% of the southern hardware. Everyone at the table was quiet. Uncle Fa was smoking heavily, with nervousness in his eyes. I knew this was not just a test, but also a provocation. In this wild 90s, where the strong is king, strength was the only passport. I took the cold steel thing in my hand. I felt the hard texture from my fingertips. I took a deep breath. The blood flow in my body instantly the familiar sweet taste was churning in my throat, with a harsh sound of metal breaking. In the quiet, private room, that a pure steel grip strength trainer that can withstand broke in my hand like a dry noodle. The broken steel fork even glowed red from friction. Glowed faintly. Long Jay's cigarette but fell on his thigh. The secretaries were so scared that they screamed. Long was stunned for a while and then burst into laughter. Bro, Diakui, you will be my brother from now on. You have a place in this Guangzhou city. After that night, my wealth began to grow exponentially. I no longer needed to pull the flatbed truck. Long gave me the title of warehouse supervisor. Actually, he asked me to handle those tricky goods for him with brute force. I became a legend. In the freight circle. 3 months later, on the Pearl River, I bought a 3-bedroom apartment with large floor-to-ceiling, where I could see the sparkling river at night. I bought Alan expensive cashmere sweaters and imported Shisado cosmetics, and even hired a little girl to help him, named Zhaokua. But as life got better, Alan became more and more strange. He no longer likes going out in the village. He was afraid of gossip, but he always liked to go up the mountain. Now with large floor-to-ceiling, he pulls the thick curtains all day long and curled up on the sofa. Brother-in-law, there are too many people. He looked out the window at the brightly lit Guangzhou with a trace of fear in his eyes. Their breath is very bad, which makes my mind a mess. I found that Alan's sense of smell and hearing are also getting stronger. He can hear the sound of the neighbor cutting vegetables and smells various kinds of sweat and stench. In a densely populated city like this, for him with special physique, is simply a torment. What shocked me even more is, after the maid JK came for a month, her body inexplicably became thinner. That night, I went into the room to cover Alan. I found Alan was closing his eyes. She was breathing out a faint, almost invisible dark red mist with the naked eye. The fog seemed to have a life, circling in the room, and Zhaokui, who was sleeping on the floor, with a pale face like paper, with weak breathing. I suddenly realized Alan's physique is getting stronger. He was no longer satisfied with just providing me with when he was in this city full of desires and impurities. He began to unconsciously absorb the vitality of the living. To protect himself, just when I was worried about Alan's strangeness, an uninvited guest came to our home. He was an old man in a mouse suit, with an old briefcase in his hand. He looks like a retired senior official. He stopped me on my way home from work. His eyes revealed a calm that saw through the world. Comrade Chundakui, let's talk. He handed me a business card, which says Lin Zhongwo from the Southern Folk Research Institute. My heart sank sharply. My muscles tensed subconsciously. Could it be that those people from Shanghai? Don't worry. I'm not those crazy people who do human I just saw in the restricted area of Daxingan. I've seen records about the bloodline of Abka Kuk. People with this bloodline are stronger. And strong in turbid. If you bring him to this big dye vat, you're hurting him. And the whole city as well. I grabbed his collar and lifted him into a dead end. Old man, what are you trying to say? Lin Zhongwo was fearless, staring at me firmly. What he needs is the aura of the mountains, not the waste gas of Pearl River. Look at the palm of your hand. That's Kui. When you feel that your strength is getting stronger, is your heart getting colder and colder? I let go of him, looked down at my palm and saw. I don't know when it started. The lines on my palm began to glow with a faint dark gold color. That's Alan's blood color. If you want to save him and live a peaceful life, just follow me to a place. The old man pointed to the map, an old forest farm site near the deep mountains. There is a formation eye that can suppress his physique, and a truly clean way to make money that you need. The night wind in Guangzhou carried a damp in the distant disco hall came the little girl under the streetlight. The dynamic melody belonged to the hustle of the 90s, but in my ears, those sounds have degenerated into a blurred only Lin Zhongwo's even, and almost cold breathing, pierced my eardrums like a needle. I was silent for a long. My mind flashed quickly. Alan's curled up figure in front of the floor, and Zhaokui's face, withered face like dried flowers. I finally decided to take Alan away. But I've had enough of being poor. What is that clean way to make money? You have to explain it to me. In the border between Guangdong and Hu, there is a dumb mountain. In the early 80s, there was a secret mine with a military code, but it was later sealed due to some strange event. The minerals there were rare metals urgently needed by the aerospace industry. If you can get the goods out, the state would give you more than what Brother Long would. More importantly, the vein there could suppress the fire in Alan's body. Hearing this, the next day, I made an excuse, saying I would take Alan to Hong Kong for vacation. Brother Long was a little but he was busy with a big smuggling deal, so he didn't check. I sold most of the electronic parts I had, inventory, and exchanged them for gold bars and heavy 100 yuan bills, and sewed them into our cotton padded clothes. When leaving the apartment by the Pearl River, Alan stood at the door and looked back. His eyes were empty. He had lost a lot of weight. His skin was almost transparent, and in the morning light, it glowed with a pearl-like death. I touched his head, but my heart felt like being cut by a knife. We got on a dilapidated Jifang truck. The truck swayed and left the brightly lit place, heading towards the rolling mountains of northern Guangdong. As we rose in altitude, the air became cold and refreshing. I could clearly feel Alan's rapid breathing became steadier. He was like a beast that finally returned to the forest, fell asleep deeply in the bumpy carriage, and a long-lost smile appeared on his mouth. The Yaba Mountain is even weirder than the Greater Kingdom. The mountains are full of dark and solemn. No birds, and I couldn't even hear the insects. Lin Jia took us to an abandoned dry-laid barracks. It was originally an engineer battalion in the 50s. On the wall, there are faded slogans for finding treasures for the motherland. From today on, I'll be the ranger here from now on. Lin Jiangwo pointed to the back. The dark mine hole behind the barracks. Every morning you go in and carry out a piece of ore. But remember that you must hear an echo in the cave. The thickest one. That's the mother ore. I frowned and said, is it that simple? Lin Jiangwo sneered, indicating that the cave is bottomless, which accumulates underground miasma. Ordinary people would suffocate in 3 minutes, but your lungs and your eyes were born to grow there. I settled Alan down, although the barracks are simple, but there is a bottomless cold pool here. When Alan saw the cold pool, his eyes lit up. He took off his shoes and put his feet into the icy water. In an instant, the water actually gave off wisps of heat. The next morning, I carried a special steel wire basket. I walked into the mine that had been sealed for 10 years. Once I entered, the intense, intolerable darkness and cold instantly enveloped me. Ordinary flashlights couldn't light up here at all. The light seemed to be swallowed by the dark. I turned on the alien vision. My pupils instantly dilated in the darkness. The scene in front of me turned into different shades of gray and black. All the rock textures were as clear as reliefs. I went in about 500 meters. The air around me became viscous. I could feel an invisible pressure squeezing my chest. With a hum, a faint chirping came from the depths of the cave. I followed the sound and walked. In a pile of collapsed rocks, I saw a stone with a faint blue glow on it. It's not big, only the size of a fist, but it was sizingly when I held it in my hand. The brute force in my body, I felt a resonance with it. My heart was beating, began to synchronize with the ore. When I carried the ore out of the cave, Lin Jiangwo was anxiously waiting at the door, seeing the dark blue ore. His hands were shaking. Sure enough, only you can hold it.
Dekui, this is the essence of Jing metal.
This small piece is enough to exchange for your salary in Guangzhou for a year. But I didn't look at him. I walked straight towards the cold pool. Ellen was sitting by the pool. Her long hair was scattered on the water. She gave me a very charming smile when she saw me. She reached out and took the ore from me. The moment the ore touched his palm, the blue light began to seep into his skin little by little. At that moment, I felt that Alan's aura had changed. He was no longer the one who needed to rely, fragile sister-in-law who needed to absorb others' essence. He was more like a god in this deep mountain, God gradually awakening. Days passed by day by day. My wealth was growing exponentially through Lin's increased exponentially. I saved a whole suitcase of passbooks in the county. My waste recycling company also became the local leader, but I found that my body was also changing. My skin began to become as hard as a mineral. My nails grew rapidly and were as hard as iron. In the summer of 1990, the dumb mountain was stuffy like a huge steamer. I deposited in the county's deposit to me when a 10,000 yuan my life? In the era when a 10,000 yuan household could be in the news. The passbook in my hand was so thick that it was scary. I bought Alan. I bought the first Siemens refrigerator in the county. I bought a gold chain, and even asked Lin Jiangwo brought back a set of leather sofa from Guangzhou. In the newly renovated barracks, I was not happy at all, because Alan was sick, which was very strange. His originally ruddy and almost coquettish face now looked like a dead ash. The dark golden lines under his skin no longer flowed, but were as stiff as a dried-up riverbed. Brother-in-law, I'm thirsty. Alan leaned against the leather sofa. Eyes were dull. I quickly poured a glass. That kind of water soaked in orchid or Alan vomited violently after taking a sip. The water she vomited was not clear, but mixed with a black, greasy substance. I suddenly opened the window. A pungent smell of sulfur and coke, sneaking into the room with the wind. The once lush ridge outside the window has been dug, in several large holes, like a back with a carbuncle. The professional mining team invited by Lin is running a roaring diesel engine, drilling deep into the mountain day and night. To earn more money, Lin Jiangwo persuaded me to expand. Those abandoned or dressing waste just flowed down the slope, and swaggered, flowed into the cold pool where Alan often sat.
I finally found it. All the accounts of these years are here. With it, I can take control of the whole situation. No one can stop me.
Lin Jiangwo rushed in with the ledger, with a crazy look on his face. I turned my head sharply. The dark golden light in my pupils was almost substantial. I snatched the ledger from him. I roared. Can't you see he's dying? Lin Jiangwo was stunned. He looked at the listless Alan, and then looked at the dusty mine in the distance. He avoided my gaze with some guilt. Is there always a price to be paid? When we save enough money, let's go and take Alan to Beijing. To go to America. I pointed to the charred land outside the window. Every word seemed to be squeezed out between his teeth. This mountain is his route. If the mountain is ruined, he can't live. Just as I was about to forcibly close some mines, a long-lost voice sounded outside the barracks. Brother Dekui, business is booming. Brother Long was wearing a fancy silk shirt, with 6 burly men following him behind. These men all had bulges on their waist when they got off. I could tell they were carrying guns. He looked at my barracks, and looked at Alan on the sickbed, with a hint of greed in his eyes. I heard you made a fortune in the mountains. I didn't believe. Now it seems that you are guarding a gold mine. But, bro, you can't swallow this kind of business alone. Share it with everyone. I stood in front of Alan. The power in my body vibrated violently with anger, and the cement floor under my feet caused several tiny cracks in the cement. Long laughed heartily. He took out a stack of documents from his pocket. Dekui, this is the age of the law. This is what I got down. The comprehensive development permit. Your illegal mining and quarrying. You'll be in jail tomorrow. Either you hand over the mine to me, and I'll hire you a security chief, or I'll have a bulldozer flatten this all. By the way, and your sister-in-law who has an unknown... I heard that women with this physique are worth a lot of money in some places. At that moment, I heard the sound of my reason breaking down, but I held back because I saw Alan struggling to reach out, grabbing the corner of my cloak. Her eyes were full of pleading. She didn't want me to become the beast that killed bears. Bloody beast again. Longier's men set up camp on the mountain, and set up camp, they started to use explosives in order to get the ore as soon as possible. They even wanted to blow up the boulder on the top. It was the backbone of the mountain, and the key to suppressing the groundwater vein. That night, I stayed by Alan's bed. I suddenly felt deep in the earth. A dull sound came from deep inside. It wasn't an explosion, but some ancient existence was turning over in pain. My hearing instantly covered the entire mountain. I heard the underground water vein frantically seeking an exit. I heard the rock layers shattered by explosives gradually and Alan's situation was even more critical. Her body was hot, and the lines under her skin were flashing. It was an alarm. It was the last notice left by nature to mankind. Brother-in-law, the mountain, opened her eyes. A line, clear slit. I rushed out the door. The sky was full of stuff, but it was terrifyingly. I knew that Longier's excessive mining had already touched the bottom line of the mountain. Once the mountain collapses, not only the mine, at the foot of the dumb village where hundreds of families lived, will be instantly be engulfed by mudslide. Lin Zhongwo also ran out. He held a compass in his hand, and his hands were shaking. Kui, something's wrong. The geomagnetism is wrong. Let's get out of here. If we can't hold it, let's go. What about the hundreds of lives below the mountain? I looked back at Alan. He struggled to stand up, holding the door. I rushed towards the ridge. Under the moon's Long's construction teams, they wanted to complete the last large-scale blasting. I was like an angry lion, swooped down from the slope 100 meters away. Long was terrified when he saw my appearance. I used my alienated arms to insert into the hard hole, like lifting a carpet, and tore the fuses of the explosives apart. 2 strong men tried to shoot me. I swung my hand back the wind from my swing, and directly knocked them several meters away. Just then, a thunderbolt slashed across the sky, and the rainstorm came as like broken beads falling on the ground. The loosened rocks and soil, lubricated by the rain, began to make a terrifying rumble. Mountain is collapsing. Run! Long's men scattered and fled, and even the 2 jeeps were left behind. I stood at the flood discharge of the path. I felt that 10,000 tons of mudslides were gathering above, like a grey giant opening, its mouth wide, ready to swallow the village below. The dark golden blood in my body, burning at an unprecedented speed. I could feel that. It was Alan through some kind of sensing, all of his last spiritual energy, into my body with all his strength. Stop it now, silly bitch. I let out a roar that shattered the rain curtain. My shoulders pushed hard, a giant granite falling from a height. The boulder weighed several thousand catties. It would have accelerated down the slope and become the vanguard of the mudslides, but with my flesh and blood, I forced it to stick on the corner of the mountain road. My feet were deeply embedded in the mud. My bones creaked under the weight of the stone. Blood gushed out through my pores, but was instantly dyed a light golden color, a layer of light gold. At that moment, I was no longer Hunter, but a statue rooted in the earth. That moment, I felt like I was no longer a flesh and blood body, but a needle piercing into the center of the earth. Tens of thousands of tons of mudslide rushed with force, rushed against the granite, and then poured down along my tense spine. The cold mud poured into my neck, and stones hit my back. The impact of every second was enough to turn a truck into scrap metal, but I can't retreat. Behind me is not only Alan, but also Yaba village, hundreds of men, women, and children still asleep. My vision was blurred by blood and rain. In the extreme pain, I seemed to hear the breath of the mountain. It was a heavy tired, but also heavy resonance. When the first ray of dawn pierced the clouds, shining on the dumb mountain, Longier and those people climbed out of the mud in a mess. They were stunned by the scene in front of them. I was covered in blood. I still held the pass tightly. Long looked at me and looked at the stone that I had pushed hard, that had been embedded 3 feet into the soil. The 5-shot shotgun in his hand was shaking so badly, I struggled to stand up. Although every move, every bone was screaming, but the light in my eyes has never been so clear. Brother Long, you can't dig this mountain. And you can't take the money. Lin Zhongwo and the men from the village arrived. They held hose and poles in their hands. They looked at the illegal mine destroyed by mudslide, and saw me risking my life to save. Long still wanted to resist, but he found that in front of the majesty of the mountain, and his terrified bodyguards in front of them, his so-called power and money were as light as paper. Within 3 days, the Privacity Folusad arrived overnight. Brother Long and his illegal construction team were arrested. Lin Jiang surrendered voluntarily, and provided key geological report was exempted from, but all his savings for half a lifetime was to compensate the village's dumb mountain was sealed off. It is no longer the kind of crazy mine with blood, but was designated as the first provincial natural ecological restoration. I voluntarily handed in the passbook, which I earned by cutting meat on this mountain. I didn't want it. I only made one request. Alan and I want to stay here as forest rangers. I just need the government to pay me monthly. They agreed. But that's not the point. The point is, a white-haired professor in charge sized me up for a long time, and finally put on his glasses and said, Comrade Darkui, your Felixin Epi is amazing. Your cardiopulmonary function and bone density are simply born to protect this mountain. Perhaps this is the choice of nature. I smiled and didn't say anything, and Alan's illness was cured when those roaring machines were removed, when the black sewage was cleaned up, when the first green climbed up the blasted ridge again. His face became healthier than before. It was a rosy complexion with vitality, rather than that kind of pathology. In the spring of 1993, the dumb mountain was covered with rhododendrons. I carried a rucksack, holding a common shovel in my hand, no longer for mining, but to fertilize the newly planted saplings. We want both green waters and gold and silver mountains. This is the best way for humans and nature to get along. Alan walked beside me, holding a kettle in hand, and from time to time sprinkling a few drops of special mountain spring. The children in the village sometimes climb up the mountain to listen to my story of blocking the mountain. I always tell them that was not some magic, but a warning from nature to us. We should be good to the mountain, and the mountain will be kind to us. As the sun set, Alan and I sitting on the boulder that once saved the whole village. The golden afterglow fell on Alan's profile, only to ordinary people, and a vibrant green mountain. In the winter of 1904, heavy snow blocked. After Yobushan became a nature reserve, life has indeed become much quieter. The province allocated a summer month. A red brick and green tile forest station was built on the hillside. I was the state. Alan was an extra ranger. Our daily work is to patrol the mountain and prevent fires, and record the traces of wild ant. But this tranquility hides ice chips. That morning, on the snow, I found a set of footprints that didn't belong to animals. The footprints were deep, not floating greatly. Most importantly, beside the footprint, there were a few yellow bullet casings scattered. Alan squatted in the snow, gently touched the footprints with her fingers, with a slightly pale face. In this era, as some people got rich first, and rare furs have become hard currency for some to show off, a complete snow leopard skin on the black market can be worth a decade's salary of an ordinary worker. I picked up the shell, which was a bullet from a Type 56 semi, which means the other party is not an ordinary victim, but a professional poaching gang with prepper or even outlaws. I asked Alan to lock the door at the station. I tightened the axe behind me, the long extinguished dark golden flame in my eyes. I didn't bring a gun, because in this dense, my body is the deadliest weapon. In the cold environment, my alien body is more active. I held my breath. I became like a dead tree, and merged into the white forest. My hearing penetrated the howling wind and snow, capturing the faint voices from several kilometers. That's enough for us for a while. I'm afraid of meeting the ranger.
Those guys are no match for me.
But they can't catch us. I quietly circled around to their upwind. There were 4 of them, all in camouflage uniform, holding guns in their hands. I could have done as I used to, rush over with brute force and smash them to pieces, but I know that it's safest not to expose my identity. I reached out and gently pushed the red pine bent by the snow. The next second, a huge amount of snow, before the 4 of them could react. I jumped down like a grey lightning, jumped down from the canopy. I didn't use all my force. I just used the edge of my palm. I accurately slashed the leader's back of the head. At the moment the man fell, I took the rifle from his hand smoothly. I twisted it hard. With a snap, the barrel made of diamond, bent like a twist in my hands. Then I threw it on the snow like garbage. The remaining 3 were terrified, and then turned and ran. The poachers ran away on their hands and knees. But I knew this was just the beginning. As long as there are treasures, the greed of the outside world will not stop. Back at the station, Alan was sitting by the fire. He didn't show any fear. Instead, he seemed a little excited. Brother-in-law, look at this. He took me to a small valley behind the forest station. Because of the snow melts, a green patch of herbs had grown unexpectedly. I recognized that which was the long extinct resurrection grass. These days, I found that as long as I was here, these herbs would grow exceptionally well. Alan squatted down and gently stroked the leaves. The leaves swayed slightly with his touch and gave off a refreshing fragrance. I understand. At this moment, Alan's physique has finally evolved. He is no longer a taker, but a giver back. He regained his health through the mountain. And the mountain, also because of his care, has regained the ancient spirit. But this aura quickly attracted greater trouble. In the spring of 19... A Cherokee Jeep with a provincial license plate stopped at the gate of the forest station. The people got off was an old scholar with thick glasses and several businessmen in suits. Hello, station master. I'm from the provincial biology. I heard that here. Have discovered extremely rare medicinal variation. The old scholar's eyes were full of curiosity, and the businessmen behind him were full of money symbols. They proposed, in the name of scientific, in Mute Mountain, to build a closed medicinal material. To put it simply, the herbs grown in this area will belong to us, and give you a large sum of money every year. The merchant's tone carried an unrefusable arrogance. I looked at Alan, the herbs that Alan had nurtured with great effort, and then looked at the development agreement in their hands, and then refused without hesitation. Now the merchant was angry, saying that they have approval from above, and it's called resource monetization. The forest ranger in a mountain has no idea what modernization means. That night they ignored the Zulan, forced their way into the valley to collect samples. I stood at the entrance of watching the flashlight in their hands flashing. I knew violence could not be completely this kind of erosion under the banner of... I didn't hit them with my hands. I just took Alan, stood on the highest rock in the valley. Alan closed his eyes and made a few clear whistles in his mouth, which he recently learned to communicate with the creatures in the mountain. In an instant, the air in the valley seemed to freeze. Countless wild bees emerged from the cracks. The wolves in the distance let out a low howl. Even the ground under their feet began to tremble slightly. Experts and merchants who were digging for herbs suddenly felt a chill from the depths of their souls. They found that all compasses were malfunctioning. All electronic devices, all made harsh wolf sounds. In their hallucinations,
The forest in front of them seemed to have turned into a huge...
ready to swallow them at any time. Go. This place is haunted. They fled the valley in a panic, and even the expensive sampling equipment was left in the mud. I watched their backs, but my heart was heavy. They were scared away. What about next time? As long as the outside world is still pursuing these miracles, the Silent Mountain will never be truly peaceful. Brother-in-law, we can't just guard this mountain. Alan leaned against my arms. Uncle Lin once said that the outside world is developing too fast. Many places have gone bad. If we can send these well-grown herb seeds and send them out to grow in other places, would they stop staring at us and leave us alone? My heart was suddenly shocked. Yes, one flower does not make spring. From that day on, the forest station added us. Alan and I collected seeds from the mountains every day through Lin Jiangwo's connection to forest farms and scientific research institutions. We didn't charge a penny. The only condition is they must be planted according to nature and no chemical fertilizer. This decision turned Yobishan from a coveted treasure into a green source. In the summer of 1998, the country was developing zones. The seeds I and Alan sent out in several old forest farms and laboratories caused a sensation. Those seeds were not only resilient, but also contained some highly active natural ingredients. But in some people's eyes, it was not called green hope, but a cash cow. That day, a helicopter that was extremely rare at that time hovered over the Yaba mountain. The huge sound of the propeller, shaking the birds in the forest to fly. Lin Jiangwo came up the mountain dusty. This time he was not alone, followed by several stern-faced men in dark jackets behind him. Alaya something big. You are in Guangzhou, the Fei uncle, and the big boss behind Brother Long. They have teamed up, through their overseas connections, to the offered an irresistible sky-high investment. It's ostensibly to build a mised TCMZ, but to dig out the foundation of Yaba Mountain. Take Alan away. I gripped B and Dan's hand tightly. The wooden house of the forestation was dark at night. Alan sat on the Kong. The moonlight shone on her shoulders like jade. She seemed to have sensed something, and she behaved unusually calm. I walked behind her, with those hands that could crush iron pipes, gently combing her long hair. My strength has been restrained to the extreme, like an old lion guarding its territory. With me here, no one can take Alan away. And this time, I want to end this completely. I can't take Alan away with me, because if we leave, the dumb village will be retaliated. Uncle Lin will be involved. This mountain, they will use the name of finding us. Turned upside down. At dawn the next day, 3 large displacement black SUVs arrived at the gate of the forest. A man in a well-tailored suit. A man wearing gold-rimmed glasses got out of the car. His name is Mr. Shen. He is the agent of the multinational consortium. There were several heavily armed bodyguards by his side. And even to scientific researchers with precision tests. Station Master Chun. I've heard of you. Mr. Shen smiled slightly, with a cold-blooded shrewdness in his smile. This time the other party said they were not here to fight, but to pick up Miss Allen to a better place to develop. As long as this 5 million check is mine. I blocked the door with a pole. Allen walked out calmly behind me. The instrument in the scientist's hand suddenly issued a sharp alarm sound. Mr. Shen's vital signs were off the charts. It was on him. Mr. Shen's eyes suddenly became fanatical. Allen patted my hand, which was a signal to reassure me. He walked to the cold pool. The pool was sparkling in the morning light. It is the most lively place in the entire site. Before everyone could react, Alan jumped into the pool lightly. Alan's voice came from the bottom of the pool, but it was clearly heard in everyone's mind. Then a scene that everyone will never forget happened. The trees on the entire silent mountain began to sway wildly. Countless green lights gathered from every corner of the forest and continuously poured into the pool. The originally clear pool turned into a rich emerald color, unbreakable emerald color. Then a huge wave of energy similar to some ancient consciousness exploded with the pool as the center. Mr. Shen and others were overturned by this air wave, and the expensive instruments were instantly black. All were ruined. When the light faded, the pool calmed down. Alan emerged from the water slowly. His original enchanting, rosy, almost inhuman temperament the dark golden lines also completely She looked like the most ordinary rural girl who grew up in the mountains. And I also felt that the violent power in my body was receding rapidly. Instead, it was a long-lasting and unshakable tenacity. Mr. Shen, I'm afraid I'll disappoint you. Alan walked up to the terrified Mr. Shen and said, with a calm tone, I have returned that power to the mountains. Now I'm just an ordinary forest ranger. If you still want my blood, he is no different from ordinary people now. The scientist trembled and took the last bit of spare reagent to test and then fell to the ground. It's gone. All the special active factors have disappeared. He is just an ordinary man. It turns out that Alan and who is also my wife, were the essence of the mountains. The reason why my wife died was all because of humans' destruction of nature. Now Alan returns everything to nature and became an ordinary man. Mr. Shen looked at the verdant mountains and then looked at me standing beside Alan, although he has lost his head. But I was still as calm as a mountain. He knew that this deal was a complete loss. In the 90s, era when power and capital were intertwined, he could take by force. But he couldn't get anything from a person who gave up. Get anything. The storm finally subsided because it lost its scientific value. The consortium within the province, due to the strange natural phenomenon caused by the miracle, officially issued Silent Mountain, listed as a permanent natural ecological reserve. No one can, in any name, for any commercial use. Lin Jiangwo became the honorary consultant of the and Alan and I still lived in the red brick and green tile forestation. On the day of Hong Kong's return in 90, we sat on the roof of the forestation to watch the moon. Alan leaned on my shoulder. I reached out and pulled her into my arms, although my hand couldn't crush the steel pipe anymore, but I could protect her for the rest of her life. I knew as long as the mountains and green, we would be the richest people in the world. In the summer of 1998, the air across the country was filled with an uneasy moisture. It should have been the coolest season in Dumb Mountain, but the rain that year seemed like God had pierced the sky, and it kept pouring endlessly. Alan and I, though we lost our obvious supernatural power, but the gifts from the mountains had already been engraved in our. It was an almost instinctive premonition.
Dewey, the storm is coming.
Stood in the corridor of the forestation, looked at the distant cloudy horizon, although his body is no different from ordinary people. But when the thunder rumbled, his earlobes would tremble slightly. That's him sensing the resonance from the depths. The province issued an emergency, all personnel from the free system, to support the flood fighting front. I took the axe that had been with me for 10 years, and boarded a military truck to Jujing. The river was murky that year, roaring and crashing against the crumbling embankment. I stood on the deadline of flood control, and there were young soldiers around. When the first seepage burst out, I didn't wait for orders. I was the first to carry a 200-inch sandbag, and directly jumped into the icy torrent. I found that even without that dark golden blood, when I exerted myself to protect something, in my muscle, a dark energy as tough as steel would burst out. Who is that black-faced man? He carried the load of 3 people alone. The young company commander shouted at me. After continuous fighting, after the flood receded, I came back. I was awarded skin, but I didn't want the bonus. Instead, I applied. I exchanged it all for, which was rare in China at that time, mangrove saplings and selected pine seeds. In 1999, the last year of the century, society was discussing the millennium bug and starting businesses. Alan and I in Yobishan, Dumb Mountain, we did an earth-shattering thing. We mobilized the whole village, the last piece of ruins left by the last piece of ruins, and planted it into a forest. The seeds we sent out in those years began to bloom and bear fruit all over the country. One day, a man who came from Ningxia all the way here found the forest station. He held an old yellow envelope in his hand, which was the tamarisk seed we sent 3 years ago in that sand nest. More than half of the seeds we gave. I looked at Alan. In the corner of his eyes, have some fine smile lines on the corners, which is a medal left by time. We are no longer the weirdos who drank bathwater, drinking bathwater in the deep, nor are we the mercenary tour guides on the streets of Guangzhou. We have become the messengers of Earth. After the bell of 2000 tolled, the internet craze swept into the mountain valleys. Yobashan is famous for its clear water, lush forest, and sweet air. Was targeted by a wealthy tourism development company. Targeted station master. Let's be frank, your scenery is a perfect match. We plan to invest 200 million to build an aerial cableway and build several phaseological wooden. As long as you sign, you will be the deputy general manager, a salary of 500,000. A young man in a slim fit suit. Sitting on the leather sofa, he holds a golden plan in his hand, and his eyes revealed the confidence of the new era. 500 was still a huge sum of money in 2000. I looked out the window, the wild deer drinking water by the stream. The cable car goes up. The golden eagles on the top of the mountain. When the wooden houses and the underground water vein must be you are not doing ecotourism. You are bleeding the mountain dry to show off to others. The company's people were disappointed. They left. But I know, in this materialistic new century, we need to protect not only this forest, but also the purity of our hearts. In 2005, a happy event happened in Yobashan. Alan was pregnant, according to those experts' words back then. Alan's body was difficult to conceive, but after living in the mountains for over 10 years, this natural power gave us the best feedback. That night, all the animals in the forest seemed to have quieted down. I waited outside the room. My palms were sweaty. When the baby's first cry came out, I saw in a trance that all the treetops of the dumb mountain all swayed gently for a moment. It's a girl, and she looked like Alan. Lin Zhongwo also lived in the county town after he came to see the child on purpose. He stared at the baby in the swaddle for a long time, suddenly whispered to me, "Due, this child's eyes are too light." I understood what he meant. This child doesn't have the violent ability like we did back then, but he has a natural affinity for nature. When he was still in swaddling, as long as Alan held him into the usually timid deer would come close, would come up to him and licked his hand gently. I know that our blood of the outlier, after being baptized by the mountains and tempered by justice, has finally evolved into a gentle and symbiotic with nature. This is not superpower, it's a kind of innate responsibility. In 2010, Silent Mountain was officially upgraded to a national nature reserve. I'm already 50 years old. My back is a bit hunched, but I still walk as fast as I used to. Alan is still so beautiful. That beauty is no longer coquettic, but a charm like the aftertaste of old tea. Art shouting, mention provincial when she came back from wearing a white t-shirt, carrying a professional sampler, by the cold pool where we used to be. My parents and teacher said, the ecological chain of Mute Mountain is the most complete. He said it was all thanks to the first generation, who used their lives to protect it. I sat on the stone. I looked at my daughter's face full of ideals. I felt at ease. Looking back on these years, and I were both outliers of our times, but in the end we became the breath of the mountain. The smoke of the 90s has dissipated the hustle and bustle of the new century. But as long as the dumb mountain, as long as the green vitality is still flowing, our story will never have an end. The mountains stay. We will never grow. Please cherish our green mountains and waters, because that's the home we leave to our children. For our children.